Hi everyone, my name is Cindy Porter and I am the Product Educator for Colour Blast Australia. Today I'd like to share with you the ins and outs of our fabulous embossing powders. Our embossing powders are bright shimmery embossing powders that were designed especially for mixed media use. Let's head on over to the desk and I'll show you all about them.
Welcome across to the desk. I'm going to start by demonstrating standard normal stamping and embossing using the Colour Blast Floral Delights 2 stamp set that was designed by Michelle Grant. I'm just inking up the stamp with Versamark and applying some Colour Blast Tangerine Dream embossing powder to the stamped image. Just sprinkling that over the image and tapping off the excess back into my tray, and then I'll grab the heat gun out and give that a blast. Just melting down that embossing powder. Colour Blast embossing powder was designed for mixed media use, and when used in the standard method as I'm demonstrating here, you will see that it leaves a mica residue. See all that mica there after the embossing powder is melted. You can remove this with a soft brush, just like I've demonstrated there, but you will find that often there is still traces of that mica residue left on your paper. The embossing powder itself was designed for mixed media use rather than this type of clean stamping and embossing technique. So I'm going to demonstrate that again using deep water embossing powder this time to show you in the stronger colour just how much mica residue can be left behind when you stamp like this. So I've just inked up another stamp from that Floral Delights 2 set by Michelle Grant, and have a look at all that mica residue there around the stamped image. We'll just melt that embossing powder down quickly, and then we'll try to brush away the excess. That's a lot of mica residue left. So a soft brush can be used, like I mentioned, to remove the excess from your surroundings of your stamped image. But you see there, especially in the deeper colours, you can still be stuck with quite a residue over the paper. So I'm just going to do one more speeded up version of stamping one of these flowers and have another go, just to repeat the technique one last time. All that mica residue that gets left is what makes our embossing powders such beautiful bright and shimmery colours. And is why we say they're more suited to mixed media techniques than clean stamping techniques like this one, because of this residue that gets left. You can minimize the effects of the mica residue by giving them a really good brush with a soft brush, and you will get most of the residue off your paper. But if you are looking for a clean, crisp image, you might not be able to achieve that with our powders. Okay, I'm moving on now to using stormy weather embossing powder, and I want to show you a mixed media technique with it that this paste is particularly suited to. I'm just applying some embossing ink to paper. It doesn't really matter in what form you apply that, and I'm sprinkling the stormy weather powder onto that to get a nice thick coating on the paper of the dry powder. I'm then going to melt that down, and I will be, as soon as I get that melted down, I will be applying more powder while it is still hot so that the dry powder sticks, and remelt. And I'm going to keep repeating this process either by tipping powder on or dipping it into the dry powder to pick up more while the embossing powder on the card is still soft, until I get a nice thick coating of embossing powder on my cardstock. You could achieve the same thick coating of embossing powder on the cardstock by pouring mica powder onto the embossing powder onto the card and heating it from underneath, just dry embossing powder quite a lot, and heating it from underneath the card. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate the technique in that fashion because of the height of my video camera. I can't get my heat gun underneath the card and keep the card horizontal, sorry, not vertical. The powder would fall off. Silly. Okay, so this is what I was trying to achieve, was to get a nice coating of embossing powder melted onto my card. Now that I have, I'll just put away this dry powder first, and I'll show you this next technique. This is a great mixed media technique to use, and one in which these powders do really, really well. So I'm going to ink up my stamp with embossing ink. I need to re-soften the melted embossing powder on my paper, and immediately, while it is still warm and soft, I'm going to put that stamp into it. Now, I'm not going to pull the stamp straight out, and I'm not going to apply a great deal of pressure to it. I've lightly put it into the embossing powder, and I'm going to wait up to about 30 seconds or so before trying to remove it. The stamp will remove easily once the embossing powder has cooled a little bit and set. And have a look at that gorgeous image that you get. This is a fabulous technique. I'm going to stamp a couple of extra images into the same piece. Just have to soften the embossing powder each time and re-ink the stamp each time. I've just sped this up so that it doesn't take so long to show you. This is a great technique to use on absolutely all your projects, cards, scrapbook layouts, art journal pages, anything at all. You can make use of this fabulous technique. It's very, very effective. Next, I'd like to demonstrate using the powders onto chipboard, and I am using the leather embossing powder this time. Chipboard is extremely porous and soaks up the embossing ink quite quickly, so you need to make sure that you are applying plenty of it to the chipboard piece before tipping on your embossing powder so that enough powder will stick to the chipboard. Cover it completely with the chipboard and then get it back out of your tray, which can be a little difficult. I had to grab something to help me pick it up. I just grabbed a little long handled pin there to help me get it out of the tray. And then, just like everything else, going to heat that with my heat gun and melt all that powder down. Once that powder is soft, I'm going to press it back into the loose powder to get another layer of powder, and I'll do this a couple of times to get a good solid coating of embossing powder all over this cog. This is another really effective technique and makes your plain chipboard pieces look really special and very easy to achieve. Have a look at the shine on that. Isn't that gorgeous? Suddenly our dull chipboard piece now looks like a shiny metal piece with that fabulous sheen and shine of the Colour Blast embossing powders. Great stuff. I will just do another smaller cog here and speed through the process again. So loads of embossing ink first, dipped in the powder, melt, dip, melt, and repeat until you're happy with the coverage. Great way to make fabulous embellishments. Look at that shine. Isn't that fabulous? Okay, next up I'm going to use the Royalty embossing powder. That's a lovely purple colour, and I'd like to show you how effective it is to use it on metal. So I'm starting off, I've got a metal brad there in my tweezers. Just zoomed in a little bit so you can hopefully see that better. With metal objects, you do not need to use any embossing ink to hold the powder on at all. All you need to do is heat the metal. Once the metal is warm, you can literally dip it into the powder and it will immediately attach to the powder. The powder will start to melt straight on the metal. You reheat it to smooth that powder out and make sure that it gets all completely melted and you don't have any dry specks in there. And look at that result. Isn't that stunning? It is one of the best ways to colour up brads and eyelets. I'm just speeding through a couple more here, to match any project that you're doing. So I'm just doing an eyelet now as well, after the couple of different sizes of the brads, so that if you don't have the right colour for a project that you've got, all you need to do is heat it up and dip it in the appropriate colour of embossing powder to add to your projects at any stage. I also wanted to show that any metal charms that you have of any sort can also be treated in this fashion. This is a lovely lace butterfly, metal lace butterfly that I had, and I'm just doing exactly the same thing as I did with the brads and the eyelet, heating it, dipping it in the powder, melting and repeating until I'm happy with the coverage. Just be careful at the end that you wait for it to cool down before you touch it or you'll burn your fingers. Isn't that fabulous? Doesn't that look great? Embossing powder is a wonderful product to add to your stash. It can do so much. These are just a few simple basic techniques that work really well with the Colour Blast embossing powder. It covers chipboard and wooden pieces. Although I didn't show you a wooden piece, it works exactly the same on that. And metal pieces fabulously well, but still can be used for stamping, although that's not what it was designed for originally. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Please think about subscribing to the channel so that you can catch all our future educational videos and all our DT inspiration. Till next time, bye for now.